Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to our special show, the Unspoken Tears live talk show. My name is Dave Rogers. I'm the facilitator and advisor of Voice of Men 360. Let me share a brief intro into Voice of Men 360, International Men's Day, and why we talk about the unspoken tears. Voice of Men 360 is a non-profit organization founded in 2020, is based in Toronto, Canada. We're an organization born out of the tremendous need and stepping up to help provide services, support, and compassion to men and boys in a changing world. We're part of International Men's Day. International Men's Day has been serving for over 21 years. So far, over 90 countries around the world joining together, doing various activities and supporting the 6 pillars, which is the overall well-being of boys and men. We follow in their footsteps. The unspoken tears. Men do have feelings, emotions, and stories. How often they're kept suppressed. Many of us think that only women are going through sexual abuse, domestic violence, human trafficking. Many men also have to face these challenges in their lifetime, but never been told how to. There are many unimaginable stories behind every man. This is why we want to create a space, a safe space, to openly discuss, openly challenge, the openly heal the vulnerable in our society. This show runs on the second Saturday every month from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We bring in experts, real life stories to talk about, have a conversation, respect, listen, ask. There will be a one-on-one conversation, panel discussions, and if you have questions, please feel free to send them in. Before I introduce our special guest for today, I'd like to go through our disclaimer. We'd like to remind you that Voice of Men 360's mission is always delivered with good faith toward peaceful harmony. The views and opinions expressed in today's episode are those of our speakers that do not represent Voice of Men 360. Organization engages in discussion forums to offer inspiration and create awareness to the issues of men who wish to overcome their life challenges, to step forward with compassion and harmony. We're not providing medical or therapeutical advice. Should you require that type of assistance, we recommend you contact a medical professional immediately. If you have questions or concerns about today's episode, please join us on Voice of Men 360. Submit an email at info@voiceofmen360.org. Add some positive comments to our Facebook or our YouTube. Our special guest today is Armand King. Armand is 40. He's a co-founder of an aptly named nonprofit, Paving Great Futures. Fueled by his experience in the streets, King serves as a shepherd to guide others out of prison pipeline, criminal activity, domestic human sex trafficking that he knows all too well. Armand's experience includes creating and implementing new programs serving current and former gang members, criminal justice involved individuals, and high-risk youth. Armand serves on boards and task force on law enforcement relations, human trafficking, and victim advocacy issues. He conducts community outreach programs for high-risk communities. He also serves as a credible messenger and mentor to young adults and juveniles on probation and in custody. Armand draws upon his direct experience with the criminal justice system, including incarceration and the challenges of re-entry to guide others. For many years, he was misguided by the streets and helped to misguide others, not realizing the detriment of his actions. Life for him now is filled with rewriting his past, helping others pave a greater future. Thank you for joining us today on Unspoken Tears. Kindly, Armand, where were you raised and what was your childhood like?
San Diego. I'm on mute.
You're on good. You're good now.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Well, thank you first and foremost for having me, and I'm sharing your platform. It's definitely recognized, and I appreciate it. You could have had a million other guys on here with backgrounds similar to mine, but you asked me, so I truly appreciate it. I was born in San Diego, California, where pretty much I spent most of my life, raised here, specifically Spring Valley, for those that know the area and the region, in Southeast San Diego. And my childhood, as you read my bio and the work that you described in that brief bio, I've been doing for over a decade now. So in that decade, I've come across many, many individuals who make my background seem like I grew up in a perfect world in Disneyland, honestly. So I hate really talking about my background because it's kind of the typical story of a young Black man growing up in my neighborhood and the neighborhoods like mine throughout throughout North America, Canada, and the United States. Just lack of resources, lack of opportunities. I was born in 81. So I was born during what we call here the Black Plague, or the crack epidemic, chemical warfare that was done on communities of color throughout the United States. So I was born into chaos. Many of my peers and my friends were born with chemical imbalances when they started life. So I was born in a chaotic time, a time unlike any that the world's history has ever seen. Mothers being the pillar of the household. 8 of my best friends, not one of us had a father in the household. I was one of those. My dad was somewhat there until about 10 years old, not the best role model at all. And unfortunately, he didn't have the best role model of a father. So I understand and I see where he got his ways from. And it was passed down, learned behavior. So it's been a fight for me just growing up like that, being trained to be a gang member, being trained to be a drug dealer, being trained to be misogynistic, being trained to be a pimp and a player. I'm saying trained, but there was nobody really over me, just training me to do it. It was a combination of society, of media, of, that lack of fatherhood and that lack of opportunities that was training me to be all of that. But yeah, homeless kid from, most of my junior high school years, really became a wannabe gang member around 12 years old. Now, as I've, been fortunate enough to become 40 years old and looking back and being able to analyze all the different parts of my life from childhood on, as far back as I can remember. I was at my wildest and most crazy times in junior high school. And that was when my family was homeless. That was when a lot of major, blows were happening to my mother and father's relationship and hit our relationship. And I could see that looking back now, that is why I was the craziest. I didn't realize I was reacting to what was happening at home, at school, taking it out on my own life, not knowing. But yeah, basically rocky childhood, but not rockier than many others out here. I think about kids that grow up in the foster care system, and from early on, young kids, that youth that grow up in the foster care system, who have to grow up with no parents, who have to grow up when your mind is like the super sponge and soaking up everything around you, and you have to soak up thinking constantly that no one loves you. I could only imagine what they go through. So yeah, my background, it's rough and rocky, baby, to some, but to others, I had it great.
I was curious about, as a youth, what role did the education system play in your formative preteen years and teenage years?
Well, I'll start off. I'm a high school graduate. I have some college. I went to the military, but when I look back at the school system, and I've really analyzed this over and over again, I can't remember one thing that I learned in school. And I probably did pick up some stuff, but now as I can look back and see things I've learned at 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. But yet when I think about the school system, San Diego Unified School System to be exact, and I can't remember one thing that a teacher taught me, one thing of value that I was able to carry on into my adult life or life. Even if we're talking about simple mathematics, 1 + 1, 2 + 2, can I remember that teacher that taught me that? No, I remember my mother that taught me that before the school even got to me to teach me that. I was already doing math and basic reading, and that came from home. But the school system really taught me nothing. I was rejected a lot, and then you grow up and, I deal with a lot of people, and and through communication, finding out, you hear about these certain key teachers that were really instrumental in the kid's life or in that individual's life, this coach at school, this somebody. And I know they exist. I know many beautiful hearted, great teachers, great principals. I operate my program, my organization, Paving Great Futures. We have two middle school programs right now. One is in the school that I went to when I was a kid, or a young terrorist, I call myself. But those principals, those teachers, they're so rare. I didn't have that fortunate opportunity to have one of them in my life. So the school system didn't do much for me. It was especially in middle school. I think my middle school was like a prison. Honestly, it was set up like jail. It was segregated. We were able to do anything and everything we wanted to. I had straight F's and D's my entire, we're talking about ninth, what was that, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. I had F's and D's the entire year, the entire time. And yet they continued to progress me and pass me. I was barely in class, but yet they continued to progress me and pass me. Never did a summer school. Never had a tutor brought to me. Never asked, how are you doing, Armand? What's your home life like? No one really dug in to figure out, why is he acting bad? No one knew I was homeless and I'm stealing food from my family. No one knew that my mom had just taken in two of my cousins, and they were homeless now with us because their mother was so far gone on drugs. No one knew my household was like that, where my mom was barely even there, and we were raising ourselves as kids. So school for me, it was just there. It was a place to go to. By high school, I was already, making money, hustling. I started selling weed, which is now legal, by the way. I was 12 years old when I started selling weed for the first time. By the time I'm in high school, I'm at school drunk every day, smoking every day, and just passing a long time. Learned how to con school by that time. But the school system, I can't give it any round of applause at all. It's unfortunate. I can't think of one thing a school teacher ever taught me, but I can remember every single Snoop Dogg line from 1993 to this day. So I had teachers. It just wasn't at the school.
Well, interesting. By the time you reached sort of 18 or 19, what crimes did you witness? And what do you feel was the main driver for your life of crime?
So I probably witnessed everything under the sun. Everything from shootings to been shot at. By 18. I had already been shot at twice. I had been involved in white collar crime myself, from bad checks to even all the way down to, I entered the game of what's called human sex trafficking. I entered the game at 16 years old. It was the first time I was out there, and first time I had entered into becoming a pimp. So I witnessed that. I witnessed prostitution. I witnessed all kind of thefts. No, I never witnessed a murder. Fortunately, but unfortunately, by 18, I had lost two of my best friends to murder, one at 12 and one at 15 years old. So I've been witness to a lot. And I forgot the second half of your question. I apologize.
Not a problem. I guess we are talking today about life before and after human trafficking. Tell us a little bit about sex trafficking in the States. Is it growing? If so, why? What do you feel are the main drivers and perhaps key factors that is fueling the growth?
Okay. So for first, before I even go into trafficking, because trafficking is such a broad term, and unfortunately, most people use it as like an umbrella for all the different forms of trafficking, and that is a huge injustice to the people that are listening, because trafficking is a newer label. Human trafficking is a newer label, and it all the forms are not the same. Like, there may be similarities, but they're not the same. They should not be looked at the same. They should not be statistics should not be taken from all of them and lumped together like it's one issue. I was not at 16 years old. It was called just pimping and pandering, pimping prostitution to us. And it was a large epidemic that exploded in the late 90s, early 2000s in our communities, and not just in the United States of America, but in Canada as well. As I've spoken to many of my survivor friends out there, and I heard when I started talking to them at first, because you separate in your mind, or at least I did, Canada from the United States of America, especially when it comes to street life and urban street life. So when I was coming into this anti-trafficking world and meeting survivors in Toronto, and they were describing exactly the same lifestyle, the type of pimping and prostitution that I had experienced in the farthest other corner of Southern California. I'm like, how is this exactly the same? And I grew to know that it was led by pimps from America, from United States that were going north and crossing the border and interjecting this into Canada. So that's why it's the same, because the same people that kind of set the standards and the stage for us here in the States were the same people that were going north. So same thing. And before the game, we weren't we were just kids, just not loose and not knowing what to do, with our lives, not knowing about life. And that this was like a thing that was a new thing, and it seemed like a better option than selling or using drugs. It seemed like a better option than being a gang member or being involved in gang activity. This was new to us. And in the mid 90s, early 2000s, that was the major of the explosion. Police, law enforcement they knew exactly what was going on, but did not care. They were looking for gang members and drug dealers, guns, and things of that nature to continue the mass incarceration. But they didn't care about pimping and prostitution. It wasn't a charge for them to go after. So when I speak about human trafficking, I'm being very, very specific about what I for the sake of having a label, I call it urban domestic human sex trafficking. And that's primarily pimping and prostitution that come from poor, marginalized communities of color. And before this new trafficking term that came out and came to my attention around 2012 to 14, before that, you wouldn't even know what a human trafficking was. It was just, are you a pimp? Are you a prostitute, escort, dancer? What is it? A Mac, player. Those were the terms. And that is what I'm speaking of, not familiar trafficking, not foreign trafficking, not labor trafficking. I'm not an expert at none of those. So, and it's not growing as far as urban domestic human sex trafficking, pimping and prostitution from poor communities of color. No, it is not growing. It has actually gone the reverse direction. Then we missed the 20 years that it was able, 10, 15 years that it was able to just go untouched, untalked about. And kids were able to go down these bad paths for over a decade. And now it's a big buzz. Now everybody wants to talk about it. But it was not an issue 15 years ago. People were not talking about, not most people, not like they are now. And now we're at the tail end of it for our communities. It's not exploding now like some people may want it to seem.
Well, thank you for your input on that. I guess, did you have a turnaround point in your life? Was it in your 20s that you hit a certain pit, or you had an awakening? What was your turnaround point that sort of got you to decide that the life of pimping, the life of criminality wasn't for you, and that you wanted something different?
Right. So as far as turnaround points, it's no different from anybody else that's growing up without the proper resources and guidance and mentorship there. You kind of have to be lucky enough to grow up and grow out of it. Where you're talking about pimping here, but you could simply replace pimping with drug sales. You could replace pimping with being a active gang member, gangbanger. You can replace all these things, because all of these things are just branches off of the real root issue, which is poverty. So the question asked here is, was there a turning point? Was there a spot in my life? And I get this question so often. And no, it was not like, okay, this happened and I changed my life around. Maybe to others, but me personally, there was not that. With me, it was just being blessed to live long enough to think better, being blessed long enough to understand what life really was, or start to understand, because I'm still learning. I think we all are learning what is life, what is really important, and through when you're 16, 17 years old, with the background I had and my friends had and many of my peers had, there was you don't understand life. You don't understand how connected we are, how your actions can actually impact and misdirect other lives and put people down pitfalls that you put yourself down and through pitfalls. You don't understand that until you've actually learned it, gone through it. So it took years, and it wasn't in my 20s. At 21, I had the first time I had ever been in trouble with the law and got caught for something I did. And I immediately did 3 years in the federal penitentiary for cannabis, for weed, for 10 pounds of weed. I got a conspiracy charge, organized crime. Now I'm doing 3 years in the feds across the United States. I've done time in 9 different institutions as my first time for something that's now legal in the stock market, right? And on the stock market. So in that period, I could say if I had to narrow down a period where I started shifting, it was right before I came home. It was in jail. It was learning for the first time, being secluded away from my friends and atmosphere, and reading for the first time. Really reading a book was when I was in jail at 21. Never really read a book before. Studying myself, learning myself, being in solitude. That was like the shift. And right before I came home from prison, 2 months before I came home, my brother was murdered by 4 kids. They were 14, 15, 17, and 19 years old on a shooting spree. And that killed my brother, the one that was pretty much taking care of me the most while I was incarcerated. And that was like the biggest blow, biggest shocker. But still, I came home from prison and still got engaged back with my friends. When I came home, the pimping and prostitution epidemic had blown up even more. And when I came home, it was like I had to keep up with the Joneses, even though I had a good job. I had a house and a car immediately from coming home from prison. I still felt the need to keep up and hang out with old friends who were all in the game, all into pimping and prostitution. So I slowly started 1 foot. For a while, I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out, until finally you just realize like this is not a good, productive life for me. So I think the biggest, and I'm not the only one. There's many, 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 many people like myself that were in the game that got out. They just don't talk to the world like I do. We talk to each other, and they pretty much grow out the same way if they're lucky enough to age out. I'm sitting here with a list of dead friends down my arm right now, tattooed on my arm, that didn't get that chance to live long enough. None of us and none of them were monsters or evil people growing up. There's a set of circumstances, lack of opportunities, and misguidance, and no guidance at all is what led us down those paths. But all of them were good individuals, were good-hearted people. That we actually, like I said earlier, we chose this lifestyle because we thought it was the lesser of the evils, and we had no other options.
You made a key point in my model of the world, and that is the importance of learning. And I wanted to get your input on the idea of incarcerate versus rehabilitate. What do you see can be done to help rehabilitate people who have spent time in jail or have been addicts, who have been pimps? Is there a rehabilitation plan or strategy that you've used that has not only worked well for you, but for others?
Yes, 100%. So that is exactly the work that I've been doing with Paving Great Futures as the acting COO and co-founder since 2012, is that rehabilitation work, because we know what works. And prison is a failed system, a tried and failed system. It has not worked yet. America, the United States of America, we have the largest incarceration rate from the entire world. There's more people incarcerated in the United States than there is in the entire world combined. This is the land of the free, right? So something's not working. We keep building more prisons. People keep going back in. That's a flawed, broken system. That's an insane system. The definition of insanity, hate to repeat it, is repeating the same thing, expecting different results. And we keep doing that. We're now, I think the government and system is starting to realize or admit, not realize, they've probably been known, but now admit openly that this was a wrong and flawed system. So what we do, the work that we do is, I didn't have any formal training on how to teach and work with, this population or formerly incarcerated or men that have been traumatized. I know this show and the concept of this show is talking about, those unspoken tears. Those are ones that this man that grew up, or what we call it growing up, was forced up out of the concrete and had to navigate. And I'd like to just speaking very specific, my 8 friends, none of us had a father in the household. We had to teach each other how to be men. We had to teach each other how to make money. We had to try stuff. I was on my own at 15. I started literally living on my own in my junior year in high school. I had my own apartment. I've been on my own. I was forced into manhood, not prepared, not ready. So the work we do now is based off of lived experience, knowing taking the concept of what would I have needed to get right? What would my friends have needed to not go down these paths to where now they're dead and in the grave? So we're taking those methods and we're utilizing them through programming. I know one of the main things that captured my attention and one of my partner in the organization's attention was entrepreneurship. Well, after so many years of being on the streets, I've been an entrepreneur. I told you I started selling weed at 12 years old. I was already packaging, manufacturing, sales, distributing. I had the traits at 12. Had I had the right mentorship and the right product, I could be a millionaire right now because I had the goal. I had the drive. I had these things that people go their whole life wanting to be an entrepreneur that never get. So yeah, we utilize entrepreneurship, responsible life skill, financial literacy, community service, civic engagement, and infuse these core competencies into many programs to help people to not go back to jail. You can't just, one thing I also know, if someone's been in a life of crime, quote unquote crime, selling drugs, selling people, stealing, home invasions, if people have found that to be their avenue to make money, to take care of themselves for years, for however long, and that's the way they know or the ways they know, you can't just tell an individual, stop doing that, it's wrong. Okay, they know it's wrong. What do you have to replace it with? What do you have when you tell this drug dealer stop selling drugs? You take the drugs out of his hand or her hands. What are you putting in there now to supplement that money, to supplement that activity? So now we were tasked with creating an avenue. So as you're teaching them, as you're instructing and guiding and mentoring this individual, put some money in their pocket. Because 9 times out of 10, like how I said earlier, that gang banging, pimping and prostitution, drug dealing, these are branches off of the root problem, which is poverty. No young man wakes up at 10 years old or is in that classroom when that teacher asks him that stereotypical question, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he raises his hand and says, I want to be a pimp. I want to abuse women. I want to kill men. No one does that. Something led that individual down to that path. And it might have been seeds planted previous to that from his upbringing or her upbringing. So replacing it and also helping them recognize that they have the tools, they have the skill and the know-how already inside of them, that they have these traits that I just pointed out about myself at 12 years old. I was an entrepreneur. When someone points that out to them, instead of looking down upon them, instead of talking condescending to them and say, no, actually bigging them up, what you were doing the act may have been wrong or illegal by this nation's standard right now. And that is to be put into perspective, because this nation that is judging you and telling you what's illegal and wrong was born and birthed out of human trafficking, birthed out of terrorism and labor trafficking, sex trafficking. This nation, at once upon a time, we're talking about the laws and being illegal. At once upon a time, slavery was a law and legal. Slavery is still in our Constitution to this day. So by whose standards are we judging what's illegal and what's not legal? By whose standards is who's giving the punishments? And then who should punish those who are doing the punishments who have committed the same crimes? I don't think there's been a bigger theft in this world than the theft of the millions of Africans during the transatlantic slave trade and brought to the north, brought west. That's theft. That's rape. So it's by whose standards are we talking? Is a question. For definitely. Hope I answered your question.
Very good response. Thank you very much. I guess I am curious about your shift, and I'm really enjoying your evolution from being perhaps not feeling good about yourself to get a point now where there is an internal drive yet and also an inner peace. Was there a point of forgiving or healing yourself that you might be able to share with our listeners today who might be still wrestling with some of the guilt that they had in their childhood, and that way to get to a point where they become a force of good as opposed to continually beating themselves up and then looking to beat others up?
Right. So most definitely, and it wasn't a point. I still feel bad, and I still feel guilty for many things. For many of even some of the young men's lives that I'm helping now are young men that were little kids that admired myself and my friends when we were doing illegal activities and followed in our footsteps. The same way we didn't have fathers, and we looked up to the Snoops and the different rappers who were our teachers, and the different older friends that were in the neighborhood who they were lost too, but we didn't know it. And we followed their misguided steps also. You don't realize this is a generational thing, and that these other little, I might be 16, 17 years old, and this 10-year-old in the neighborhood is looking up to me and my friends as their father figure, as their mentor. But you're ignoring them. They're 10, you're 16, you have nothing in common, but they're watching your every footstep. So now I'm dealing with those 10-year-olds as 25-year-olds who, and a couple of times have come to me and be like, Armand, big homie, we got this from you. We learned from you. That's a pain that'll never go away. When it comes to the women that I've mistreated or introduced into the game, and just knowing and seeing that and knowing that exists, or I was a part of it in any way, that'll always hurt. Now, as human beings, because none of us, I know I'm the one being interviewed here, but I don't think there's a human being that I've met, and probably on this interview now, background, foreground, that hasn't done something that they're ashamed of, hasn't done something that they don't even want to bring out to the public ever. So all of us, what was that in the biblical? I'm not a preacher or anything, but I know there's somewhere in the Bible where Jesus said, the one free of sin cast the first stone, and no one could throw a stone, as they judged and pointed and said, how do you feel about the crimes you did? Do you feel guilty? Who's free of sin? So yes, so now that we only have this one life to live, everybody, we're limited. I might not make it tomorrow. I might not make it tonight. Hopefully we will. And we don't live with that as our mentality of death and not going to be here. But let's be real. Our time on this earth is limited. So now, yes, there's guilt there. Yes, I feel bad about things in the past. So I can choose now. Do I let that capture my mind, my heart, my spirit? So now, oh, woe is me. I'm not leaving and going anywhere. I'm just feeling down. I'm going to go hide in a corner. I'm going to commit suicide. It goes to that extreme of guilt. No, that's not what I'm going to do. Instead, yes, that's there. I acknowledge it. It's not a overlooked feeling, an overlooked emotion. It's something that now, thank God I have the mentality to shift that hurt, shift that guilt into help, into transferring that energy that I could use to be a negative downer for myself. I'm using it as an upper for other people. So many of the people that I have impacted negatively, if they come across my path, I'm doing my hardest to try and help them get their lives back on track, or on a track, not even necessarily back on track, on a track period, because they were set up from the beginning to be off track. So yeah, I do recognize that guilt, it's there. It will probably always be there. And I say this often, that I don't know where God has my karma meter, because I've yet to have that conversation where he showed me where my karma meter was. I don't know if I've done enough good work to overshadow my bad. I don't know. And I don't know if I could ever overshadow my bad. I'm not sure how that judgment happens, but all I know is I have this one life to live. And I'm going to, for the remainder of the years I'm blessed to be here, do everything in my power to help others and anyone that comes across my path to have a good life. And that is just the path that was chosen for me. And as much as I'd rather be on the beach just drawing all day, that is not my destiny. And it was not chosen for me. I do not have control of my will, of the will of this car. God does. And I'm happy with that.
Well shared. And again, for many people, that journey with God can definitely deliver some phenomenal results. I'm curious about your book, Raised in Pimp City. Would you be able to share with our audience today one or two of the main takeaways from the book, and perhaps what got that project into fruition?
Ooh-wee. Okay, so when I first got into this anti-human sex trafficking community, it was in 2014. I was drugging, not knowing what human trafficking was, but many of those young friends that I was talking to about were some of them, the crew that I started as a kid, they were indicted, about 23 of these young men, for a trafficking indictment. And I realized at that point in time that the system was now going after young Black men, specifically using this new term, human trafficking. So at that time, I was in the courtrooms with them. I was new to this advocacy work and court advocacy, and I couldn't talk. I would hear these quote unquote experts go on the stand and literally lie and make up things that to fit their narrative. And the people that were on trial or going through the court case that I knew personally that could barely get a girlfriend, let alone be a pimp. You know, I'm looking at these guys, they were bums. I think the most expensive thing on their indictment that they had was a pair of Jordans. Not one of them had a car. Not one of them had their own house. But so it was another injustice that was going on. In that year of 2014, there were 3 of these indictments in San Diego that probably eliminated and took out about 200 young Black men in 3 different communities. It was a strategic attack, and they used human trafficking and gangs as the catalyst to do this. So that jolted me into this anti-trafficking world, and I started speaking. I got invited to my first university to speak at, and in that audience, there was a deputy district attorney that heard me speak. She was new to San Diego, new to her position as a deputy DA, and she was heavily involved in anti-human trafficking work. So when she heard me, it was a shock to her to hear this side, which is not readily available. People don't talk about it, or is the former pimp or the man side. It's just never really talked about. So when she heard, she met up with me after, and she's like, the world needs to hear what you're saying. I've never heard this before. So through meetings with her, she ended up coercing me into writing this book called Raised in Pimp City, so more people can have it, have this knowledge. So we started on this journey a little over a year of writing drafts of this book, not making sure it wasn't a promotion of the lifestyle, promotion of pimping and prostitution, but an educational book for those advocates and people involved to be able to understand the mentality of the man involved, understand the in-depthness of how does he look at women, what led him into the life, what started this, where did the trend come from, like really breaking down the psychology of the male involved in the game. And so that book came out. It's been doing very, very well. I've been involved in many different speaking engagements off that book. My last one recently was in Taiwan. It's been a well-received book, and I'm greatly appreciated that people throughout the nation are utilizing this book in universities to train from. Advocates now can have this without having Armand himself there. They can have this book, this tool, and it's not meant to just be read through. You can go back in certain solutions. There's categories on solutions, on just different things. The pimp and his mother. What is our relationship like? A lot of different topics in there that can help. With a problem this big, without full and clear understanding, or as much understanding as possible, we can't really attack this problem. We can't really help this problem.
Can sex trafficking be eradicated? And if so, how? And if not, why?
It can be eradicated if we eradicate the root problem. It's just, and that is the question. And that root problem is the hardest thing to eradicate, and that's poverty. If you cannot end poverty, you cannot end human trafficking. We can put a dent in it, but as long as there's poverty in a corner anywhere in this world, and a human being is left with the decision to sell their body, to eat, to live, they're going to do it. As long as someone can find a way and to make money off of somebody's vulnerabilities because they're hungry, because they're poor, there's always going to be human trafficking. We can put it in it, we can help it, but if we cannot eradicate the root problem, you will always have the issues that grow from it, and human trafficking is one of them.
As a former pimp and now an author about living in Pimp City, is there one or two things that you could suggest or guide to assist or help victims of sex trafficking, or the families of sex trafficking victims?
Yes, sir. So for those victims, those people that are surviving and have survived human sex trafficking, my thing is, don't give up on yourself. And to be specific, because I don't know the detriment of those. I can understand. I have empathy for sure for those that have gone through other forms of trafficking. But for my expertise to be real specific to the gang that came from urban communities, like I said, urban domestic human trafficking, those survivors that come from that background, I know what you've gone through. I know the type of training and the type of mental brainwashing that we've done to each other, that we've shared in this circle. You are actually sharper than college graduates. You have a skill, you have a mentality that most people wish they had in the professional world. I tell my best friend right before my last friend that was just murdered in Houston, 2017, I was telling him, same tools, different program. It's in you, not on you. You have it. Just find the right product, the talents, you have it in you. I'll keep it brief, but you have the skills to really be successful. Stop doubting yourself. And just because you've been in for 5, 10, 15 years, and you may not believe that you have what it takes to enter into the professional world, you really do. And you can create your own business. You don't have to be a JOB just over broke. You are an entrepreneur. You have it. You are royalty. Okay. Get rid of the trauma that's around you. Get somewhere where you can get secluded. Think about it. Find the thing inside of you that you love to do the most. I guarantee in this day and age, you can be paid off of what you love. Find that out and seek proper mentorship. For the families of those victims, of those survivors, always keep your door open. Don't let this person's lifestyle be detrimental to your household, but never turn your back to them. Always be ready for when that pivot happens. Throughout our lives and being involved in these criminal activities, there's these pivot points where things hit us and we're ready for a shift. And if not caught at those times or had the right support at those times, we're drawn back into the lifestyle. Be there for them. You know, like I said, it's a fine line. Have an open door policy for your loved one if you really love them, but not at the detriment of yourself or your household. And sometimes that person, that survivor, that guy, whoever it is, your loved one that's in this traumatic lifestyle, they can bring that into your household. And I've seen it happen many times and bring families down because they were loved too much and allowed to come in. And don't let them destroy them. At that point of their healing, they might not be ready. But when you sense and you know they are, do not be condescending. Do not be down on them, but be fully supportive because we want to save their lives.
I want to congratulate you on writing a book and actually getting a book out and speaking about a book and allowing your truth to shine bright. What was your biggest learning from writing a book?
That I love writing books. I love it. I have one coming out now. It's called From the Streets to the Suites. And I wrote it with my survivor leader friend, Jamie Johnson. That'll be coming out next year. It's nearly completion. First draft is getting edited now. And that book is a total guidebook to which the last question you just asked me. It's a guidebook for those in the life and teaching them how to take the skills they had in the streets and transfer those into the professional corporate world, turning street hustle into corporate muscle. So that book is coming out soon. So what I learned from Raised in Pimp City is that Armand, there goes something else. And looking back at my past, I used to love writing. I didn't realize it. It wasn't something that you told the homies about. Oh, I'm a writer. No, you didn't talk about that stuff. So you pushed that aside. But that book helped me realize, Armand, you love writing. You can get messaging out to multiple people. I even have a book that's nearly finished now. I have 3 books that they're the same book, but they're pimp prevention books for young men. I wrote one from elementary, middle school, and high school. We're now creating the curriculum right now to be taught throughout the nation for young men not to get involved in pimping and prostitution. If we can stop them before they enter, we help save their lives and help save many, many women's lives. So this one's very specific. There's a lot of curriculums and stuff out there for the women involved, nothing for the men. It's like the only thing for them is death or suicide. So that book's called Walk With Me. So to answer your question, I just plugged 2 books, but they're in the works right now. And but yeah, that's what that experience with Raised in Pimp City taught me. Armand, you used to love to write. You didn't realize it. Now you do. It's time to write.
Well, back at you at promoting your books. What is a way that people can get a hold of your book there, Armand?
Doom, doom, doom. Well, so Armand King, that's my name. I believe it's up on the screen right here. I'm on every social media platform. So whatever you like using, please believe I am there, including TikTok. Right now, I have over 100 videos on my TikTok that are in alignment with the youth book, the Pimp Prevention book, where I'm just giving out messaging to young men and women. It's go universal just on life. But yeah, they can find me that way. Armand King, Google me. I'm not hard to find at all.
All right, great. Well, I do hope that anyone that this message resonates with will look you up and connect with your book and have a read of it. It'll be great. Speaking engagements, you've come across so wonderfully authentic and sincere and genuine today. So I really do appreciate that.
Absolutely.
The title of our show, Armand, is Unspoken Tears. And what are the unspoken tears about men that you would love to share about that perhaps isn't spoken about enough?
I got you. And we had this saying when I was in the game. We call it we talk from the hip to the lip. And I never really analyzed it. It was just a cool saying. It was like, oh man, say it from the hip to the lip. And no one ever really broke that down to me. So I kind of broke it down in recent years to myself. When we say you speak from the hip to the lip, when your hip right there, your top of your legs, right? And then it goes through your gut. I don't know what just happened. Are we still on?
Yes.
Computer technology stuff. But the hip to the lip goes through your gut, comes through your heart, and then you're out your mouth. It never really gets to your brain. Sometimes we overthink the things we're saying and just let it come natural. How from your gut, from your heart, how you really feel, and let it go here. Don't think, oh, I can't say that. But sometimes you're avoiding how you really feel for people. But I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Unspoken tears.
Oh, got it. Okay, so from the hip to the lip, I'm back on. So as you were asking the question, one of my best friends, matter of fact, the one I was just speaking about, he was just recently murdered in Houston by a girl pimp on the blade, and he was shot in the head, and he died. I've known him his whole life. As a kid, as a young kid, he watched his younger sibling die. He took found some of his parents' pharmaceuticals, his dad's pharmaceuticals, and the little baby, and took him and killed it and died. Unfortunate accident. He watched this. He then, going through a life of being abused himself. I remember one time he was like 12 years old and his mom's boyfriend had punched out a few of his teeth. He had watched his mom abused by several men. I'm just being very specific with him, but I can talk about many other men. But as we entered the game, this guy was, we used to talk about him. He was, even as our friend, we would call him ugly all the time. He was one of the less physically attractive, whatever that means to us as kids. Small, short. We would just talk about him, not knowing what was that doing to his mental. He was already diagnosed in school as being dyslexic, even though he wasn't. They probably just didn't know how to teach him because he was extremely sharp. So all these different things had happened to this young man's life. We talk about unspoken tears. He couldn't even cry. He was forced into a position you had to be tough. You had to be hard, even though inside he was probably crying daily, going through this abuse, going through this, watching abuse, going through it, witnessing it without counseling, without therapy. And then when we get into the game, out of all of my friends, he was probably the most physically abusive. And it's just, we're talking about pimping and prostitution here. Abuse of any human being is wrong, period. Don't condone it. But I'm a root issue person. So I look at the root. How did this individual get how they got? What led this? There's people with uniforms that work for law enforcement that go home and beat their wives. There's people in the NFL, MLB that go home and beat their wives. There's politicians that go home and beat their wives. And I bet you if you looked at the root of all of these men, there was some sort of abuse, some sort of alcoholism, some kind of trauma, that this didn't just happen. Same thing when I look at the people involved in trafficking, their lifestyles, they're not much different. They're almost identical to the women that get involved in the game. The same vulnerabilities, the same traumatic experiences, lack of opportunities and resources that led that woman into the life also led that man into the life. But that's the unspoken tear right there. That's the one that we're not looking at him. He's just automatically burn him at the stake, cast him as a monster. Not how can we help him? Not how can we prevent this with young men from ever happening again. Somehow that conversation doesn't happen. It's help the victim, yes, and then we should. And who's to determine what's a victim here? I just told you that both people came into the lifestyle with the same background, the same adversity. So, I hate to use, but we not the same type of survivor. We didn't go through the same thing the women went through in the game. And it's no comparison, not at all. But we are survived to be here alive. Out of 8 of my best friends that are no longer here, I've survived something. To being a homeless kid, with multiple friends murdered, looking at dead bodies, I've survived something. Those unspoken tears. And it's like having a 4-legged table that's broken, right? And we only repair 2 of the legs. What about the other 2 legs? And we cast the other 2 legs aside. Well, those legs are ugly, or we don't want those legs. Well, there's no table. Put your food on that 2-legged table and watch it all slide off. There's no stability. So we need to look at all 4 legs. And sorry for the world, if certain people don't care or not, you're going to have to repair that man too. Okay. Or you're going to keep this unrepaired man is going to keep damaging other people, men and women. So, yeah.
Armand, that was awesome. Stay with me. I have to do a little blurb for the channel, and then I've got my last question for you. So stay with me. What you're doing, your messaging is spot on, and I really appreciate it. So let me just get to our special announcement. We have a mutual agreement today with one of our supporters, author Rolando Hyman. He's a founder and operator of Therapeutic Intervention Physiotherapy and XL Spark. He's the author of Giving Myself Permission to Grow, 7 Solutions for Personal Development. It's a 47-page book packed with useful tips on self-development. Today, if you check out Mr. Rolando Hyman's book and pick it up on Kindle or Amazon, $1 for each copy will be given to the well-being of survivors of human trafficking. The link will be posted in our Facebook group and YouTube under the live video. Please support it. Thank you. We have some announcements. Our donation drive for Indigenous families by Voice of Men 360. It's still continuing. We're looking for used clothes, dry food items. Let us know at info@voiceofmen360.org or contact on Facebook, and we will coordinate to pick up the donation. September is Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. On Saturday, September 25th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., we'll be running a special show. We also have our Open Up live talk show every Wednesday at 6 p.m. and Sunday at 10 a.m. We have a Tamil live talk show on Sundays at 8 a.m. EST. And we have our monthly webinars the first Saturday of every month from 10:30 to 11:30. We discuss various topics facing men. And of course, the Unspoken Tears is the second Saturday of every month from 10 a.m. to 11, where we look at violence against men, bullying, sexual abuse, traumas, and human trafficking. Our Self-Asian Men Show is the third Sunday of every month from 11:30 to 12:30. And we run on the podcast on iPhone, Google Play, and so on. And our men's monthly group only for men is every Tuesday, every 2 weeks on Tuesday at 6 till 7 on Zoom. Pass the Talking Stick, our Indigenous peer-to-peer support group, is the fourth Friday of every month from 6 to 7 p.m. on Zoom. The next one will be Friday, September 24th. There's no limitations, gender, age, nationality, or ethnic groups. All walks of life can participate in any of our shows. If you want to be a guest on any of our shows, are willing to participate, or look for ways to connect and collaborate with the organization, please connect with info@voiceofmen360.org. Check out our website, find out our social media, drop a comment, be positive, and you'd be more than welcome to participate. Thank you so very much, Armand. I think
yes, sir.
Here we are. My last question is, you talked about resources. What 2 or 3 resources would assist you in your journey of helping men become more entrepreneurial in a positive, contributory way?
One of the main resources would be financial resources, for sure. That always helps, as we try to conquer many of these world problems. And, it takes money to actually to move anything. Money isn't everything, but shoot, it's right up there with air. To really make any movement go, it takes resources, it takes funding. So that would be number one. Number two, to help us grow and to do more would be capacity building. I didn't come from and neither did my partners. We didn't come from a background of being trained how to do this. We're just coming out of our heart and things we've learned through lived experience and been learning along the way. Been in this nonprofit world for 10 years now, running this organization, Paving Great Futures. So that definitely would be number two. And number three, connections and contacts like this. I don't take this lightly at all. Just being able to communicate with you. I love technology. You're in Toronto. I'm in San Diego, California, and we're having a live conversation for free. How beautiful is that? So that these connections and real tangible connections and contacts are priceless. And who knows where this is going to go? Our friendship. I'm glad to meet you. And who knows how we can be in alignment with each other or help together to serve other people. So those three: financial resources, capacity building, and then just contacts and good connections. I think those are very valuable.
Well, Armand, thank you very much for your time, your wisdom, your experience. Fantastic sharing today. And on behalf of Voice of Men 360 and the Unspoken Tears, I appreciate it very much. I'm wishing everybody a wonderful week. If you've enjoyed the show today, please share it with friends. If you'd like to reach out to Armand, it sounds like he's got a beautiful setup there and very responsive to connect about the book, about future speaking engagements and ways to make a difference in people's lives. Thank you very much, and wishing everybody a very magnificent rest of September, and have a great day.